Hello there folks, my name is Spoonks and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the show where I break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was The Little Mermaid, making $11 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $253 million and a worldwide total of $465 million. So despite a new Disney family film hitting theaters this weekend, this movie is still holding relatively well, just dropping a little bit over 50%, which again, given the new Disney film out right now, I think that's a pretty solid hold for this film, and given where it's at, I think it should get close to or just barely surpass the $300 million milestone domestically. I think that's very likely, and on the worldwide side of things, I think it should follow suit with the $500 million milestone as well, and these numbers would be very good if the movie wasn't ridiculously expensive. Like I said before, this is a very expensive movie with $250 million budget, and unfortunately these numbers just aren't gonna cut it. It's not like the movie isn't performing well, especially domestically. It's one of the biggest movies out right now, but I do believe that if you're at Disney, you got to be looking at these numbers and being very disappointed. I'm sure they were hoping for at least $700, maybe even $800 million at this point, but unfortunately it just didn't reach its audience, sadly, especially internationally, where it's just been bombing in a lot of countries and completely underperforming, unfortunately. So yeah, while not a complete total disaster, this is still a relatively disappointing turnout for The Little Mermaid, unfortunately. Number 4 was Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, making $20 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $101 million and a worldwide total of $276 million. So the film was able to surpass the $100 million milestone, which is very good. It puts its domestic total just $27 million away from that of Bumblebee and $30 million away from that of Transformers: The Last Knight, which is very good. It shows this movie is outpacing those previous Transformers movies, and I think it's gonna make enough to surpass both of those movies for sure. And on the worldwide side of things, I think $300 million worldwide is pretty much locked and loaded at this point, and I think $400 million worldwide is also a good shot. So yeah, those are good things, but unfortunately, things are not looking good for this movie, sadly, as the film had a huge 66% drop off after a pretty impressive opening last weekend. Unfortunately, it seems that this film just got lost in the shuffle amongst all the bigger movies, and since it's such a crowded summer movie season right now, unfortunately audiences chose the other movies as opposed to this, because it's not like audiences didn't like this movie or the movie is really bad or anything. I just think, like with what happened with Dungeons and Dragons, this was just a bad release date. There's just so much out right now that this was gonna get lost in the shuffle, sadly. Maybe had this come out a bit earlier in the year, maybe like a couple weeks after Mario, it might have done a bit better, or maybe even save this for the holiday season, it might have done better, but unfortunately it's not looking too good for Transformers, sadly. The era of these movies being these huge big summer blockbusters is long over. Again, it's improving over the past couple Transformers movies, but given the $195 million budget, I'm not sure if these numbers are going to cut it, sadly. Number 3 was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, making $27 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $279 million and a worldwide total of $489 million. So Spider-Verse, after getting knocked down by Transformers last weekend, was actually able to get the jump over Transformers this weekend, which is pretty impressive, especially considering I feel like the competition this weekend was much more directed towards Spider-Verse than Transformers, so the fact that it held better than Transformers is quite impressive. And in regards to milestones, I think it's safe to say that this movie will surpass the $300 million milestone very soon, making it the third film this year, surpassing that milestone domestically behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and the Super Mario Brothers movie. And on the worldwide side of things, I pretty much think that $500 million worldwide is locked, which would make it the third film in Sony Pictures Animation's history to surpass this milestone behind Hotel Transylvania 3 and the Smurfs. But given where it's at and how much further I think this movie's going to go, I think it'll be able to surpass both of them, or maybe even get close to the Smurfs. That's still a bit of a journey, but I still have faith in Spider-Verse. Yeah, overall, this is the movie of the summer right now, the movie of the moment right now. Everyone is still going to see this or seeing this for the first time. The fact that, again, it was able to hold relatively well against the big competition it had to face off this weekend is very impressive. It will be interesting to see if this movie can top the summer right now. It's getting pretty close to the Guardians of the Galaxy total. It'll be interesting to see how those two face off in regards to what will be the biggest movie of the summer right now. But either way, this is still a fantastic run for Spider-Verse. With a $100 million budget, this is not a bad number to be, and it's still not done yet, folks. We still got ways to go. It's still got a couple more milestones to hit in its theatrical run. So yeah, another solid weekend for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Number 2 was Elemental, opening with $29 million this weekend domestically and $44 million worldwide. This is the third biggest opening weekend for an animated film this year, behind the Super Mario Brothers movie and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and it is the fourth biggest opening weekend for a family film this year, behind the two aforementioned movies and The Little Mermaid. Now, to start on a positive note, because I do believe there are some positives here with this movie, the fact that this was an original movie and it got this close to $30 million is quite impressive. You know, the fact that original movies are kind of a hard sell, especially for families, and the fact that this got close to $30 million domestically is impressive. And also the fact that this movie had a higher opening than most of the animated movies that came out last year is impressive. It shows that families are becoming more comfortable with going back to the movies, and more of them are choosing to come see them at the theaters, which is all good and all good said and done. But unfortunately, this is still not a great opening, as this movie is ridiculously expensive with a reported $200 million budget. This is not going to cover it. This is just a bad opening. This budget was just way too expensive. If this was a Mario or a Spider-Verse and it had this opening, there are probably ways where you could salvage this. You'd be like, maybe it's able to get close or just barely get over the doubling point worldwide, but the fact that this is $200 million is quite upsetting. Unfortunately, $29 million isn't going to cover it, let alone $44 million. However, there is a silver lining here. Not a saving grace, but a silver lining, and that is the audience reaction to this film, and that is it got an A on CinemaScore this weekend, which is better than the past two Pixar films that were released in theaters, Lightyear and Onward. Those got A minuses. So audiences like this movie, and given the reception towards animated family films over the past couple years right now, I do believe that this movie is going to have much better than expected legs, and we could see a much more impressive box office run for this movie because people like this movie. I'm hearing a lot of positive things from people. Many people are saying that it's better than they expected it would be. So while this is not going to help the movie at all, because again, the budget's just way too big, I could see this movie surprising people, having much better legs, being way more backloaded than expected. But yeah, as far as its opening right now and given the budget, this is just not a good start. Hopefully it'll be able to somewhat salvage this, but right now things are not off to a great start for Elemental. And finally, let's end the video off with the number one movie of the weekend, which was The Flash, opening with $55 million this weekend domestically and $130 million worldwide. This is the fourth biggest opening weekend for a comic book movie this year, behind Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but it was able to top Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and it is the sixth biggest opening weekend of the summer. It was able to top Elemental, but it sits behind Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, Fast X, The Little Mermaid, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So it's bad enough that this movie wasn't able to top the summer box office opening weekends. It's bad enough that this movie didn't open bigger than Black Adam. It's bad enough that the movie cost $220 million. The fact that this was supposed to be Warner Brothers' big movie of not just the summer, but the year pretty much, as they wanted this movie to be their Top Gun Maverick of the year. Hell, they wanted this to be their Mario of the year, pretty much. A movie that just made all the money and just exceeded every single expectation. They put all of their eggs into this basket. Hell, may I remind you all, this was the movie they chose to return to the Super Bowl with this year. After over 15 years, mind you, of not playing anything at the Super Bowl, they come back to promote this movie. And the movie failed to meet expectations. This is a mess. This is absolutely embarrassing, unfortunately. It seems that the hype wasn't as big as many people thought it would be. There wasn't that much audience interest in this movie, and it seemed like Across the Spider-Verse stole a lot of this movie's thunder. I think the fact that this movie came out so soon after that really hurt it a bit, because like I said earlier, that's clearly the movie right now that everyone wants to see, the one that's getting all the buzz and the attention, while The Flash is not doing so well. And again, if this movie was like Shazam, because that was $125 million, you could be like, oh, well, it didn't beat some of the other comic book movies, but it's still doing very well. But the fact that, once again, this is a $220 million movie, these numbers aren't going to cut it, unfortunately. And unlike Elemental, which at the very least has good audience reception, it got an A on CinemaScore, audiences who saw this movie did not like this movie. They gave it a B on CinemaScore, which is, once again, lower than Shazam and Black Adam. Those got a B+, and this is the second film in the DCU to get a B on CinemaScore, second behind Batman v Superman, and we all know how that turned out. So I'm not even sure if this movie's going to have good word of mouth. I honestly think it's going to plummet this weekend. So overall, things are just not looking too good for this movie, sadly. It seems like this is not the big winner Warner Brothers really needed, especially after the disastrous year they've been having with Shazam, and their only big hit being Evil Dead Rise. Sure, they got Barbie and The Meg later this summer, but yeah, again, this was the movie they were hoping would be the big one, the Top Gun, or even the Jurassic World of the year, and unfortunately, it's just not doing it. So yeah, unfortunately, this is a pretty bad opening. Warner Brothers has to be disappointed. I'm sure DC has to be disappointed with how this movie's starting, and it's not even looking like it's going to have strong word of mouth or strong legs. Overall, a pretty lackluster opening, if you ask me. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this weekend, but we're not quite done yet, as we've got another week ahead of us and new movies hitting theaters. And this weekend we have one new major wide release, that film being No Hard Feelings. This is a new R-rated raunchy comedy starring Jennifer Lawrence, and 2 weeks ago I would question its chances of topping The Flash this weekend, but given how low the numbers were this weekend and my expectations for how it's gonna drop off this coming weekend, I think this film's chances of topping The Flash, maybe even stealing number 1 from it, have improved very much so, because in all honesty, I think this movie has a shot of exceeding expectations. I'm seeing a lot of similarities between this movie and The Lost City from last year, if you remember that film, as the trailer for this had a much bigger and much more positive response I think many people were expecting it to. The marketing has been pretty solid. I've been seeing a lot of ads and promotion for it. The buzz is also way bigger than I expected. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about this movie. And yeah, I could see this movie exceeding expectations. However, there is one huge hurdle this movie has to get over, in the fact that it's an R-rated original comedy, and those don't tend to do very well these days anymore. Sure, last year we had some hits, like The Lost City, as I mentioned, but also Jackass Forever. That movie did well. But a lot of the comedies last year, like Bob's Burgers, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, Bros, Easter Sunday, those all flopped. So hopefully this movie goes in the direction of The Lost City, but it could also end up like An Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So we'll see how well this movie truly does, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's gonna do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.